Have you ever been to Huntington for a game?
No, I haven't.
Have you ever heard about Huntington? What have you heard about Huntington?
Just, that they're certainly a group that loves their herd. Coach Morrison, our co-defensive coordinator, played at Marshall and coached at Marshall, and he, we have other coaches on the staff that have coached there as well. And the people at Huntington love their football team, and they're very supportive. And our guys have to stay focused with what's going on in the field because we know it'll be a tough crowd.
After Saturday's game, and particularly the second half, Missouri kind of got their run game going. Looking ahead, obviously, teams that you'll face probably going to look at what they did. I mean, how do you address that?
What Missouri does is so unique. Their run game is very unique. Very few teams will go from an empty backfield set and then motion a guy in from 15 yards away. And again, I give Missouri credit. I think when Coach Pinkel first got there, they probably ran more traditional offense and probably figured out that it was going to be tough to compete with the Oklahomas and the Texases and those people of the world doing that. And they've come up with a very unique offensive system that gives them an advantage in recruiting and from a preparation standpoint. So the way they run the football is very unique. And that's tough to prepare for in a week's time because there's really some rule breakers in there for your defensive linemen the way they run it. The challenge this week is these guys are just so physical. They come off the ball. They try to knock you off the ball. It's more, there's some schematic challenges because, do you commit the safety of the box and leave the corners one-on-one, or do you try to defend the run in a 6 or 7 man box? But the challenge really is physically being ready to play hard for 60 minutes at a team that's coming downhill at you.
How did you feel about the receivers who were getting most of the time replacing Tyrone Browning last week, Ray Hudson and Chris Wright?
I think at times they played well and made some plays, but need to get better. I don't know if they're where Tyrone was yet, but I hope. It's the first time that Ray Hudson has played 60 plays in a game. Usually there's a huge learning curve. Chris Wright made some plays for us. But at the end of the game, he wore down a little bit. Those guys got to be able to play now 50, 60 plays. And the other thing is we got to get Adrian Hodges more involved. I really feel that Adrian's had 2 good weeks of practice, and I'd like to get him in the mix a little bit more and just so we can keep those guys fresh in the fourth quarter. Because looking back on the film, early in the game, we certainly were running around a lot better than we were late. And part of that is we're asking those guys to also do special teams. And I think it's critical that Adrian get more involved and we get those guys a little bit of a break more than we did.
Well, they knew that coming in. Was there anything differently they had been doing prior to the game to get ready for that?
No, you can practice all you want, and then you show up at a stadium and it's a little south, and the heat's a little bit more thick than it is here in Bowling Green, and then you have the anxiety of doing something for the first time in front of 70,000 people, and there's always a fatigue factor with that, and the only way you get used to it is by doing it. There's nothing you can do in practice. We could go for 3 hours in 95-degree heat, and it doesn't prepare you for doing something against a team like Missouri in front of that many people. And a lot of times early in the season, you'll see teams cramp that have no cramping issues throughout camp just because, there's a nervousness and an anxiety that goes into doing that. And again, the more guys play, it hasn't happened to Freddie Barnes, and Freddie weighs more and has gotten more time and more catches, but he's used to it. He's been a starter here for a number of years, and that was the most significant playing time Ray Hudson's ever had in his career here. And he'll be a lot better this week and next week because of it.
Your running game took a step forward last week. Willie Jr. came close to 100-yard game. Where do you feel your running game is going into Marshall, and what do they need to improve on or work on?
Well, I said after the Troy game, one of the disappointments of the Troy game is that we didn't run the ball better. We spent a lot of time of it the Missouri week, and it got better. And that's going to help us because, now there's a little bit more of a legitimate threat when people look at us on film of turning around and giving Willie the ball. And Willie had some great runs. Willie did a great job of finding creases and just does such a great job of finishing runs. you wouldn't think a guy his stature would finish moving forward as physical as he does, as often as he does, and he really played well. So I think if you left the Troy game, you say, okay, you just got to stop Freddie, and then you come out of the Missouri game and say, hey, they can run the ball a little bit, and that is more the offensive balance that we would like.
Yeah, the disappointment from the Missouri game, penalties, obviously. Have you guys done anything to practice this week to negate that?
You say penalties, and then I go back and I look what the penalties were. The three that I'm really disappointed in is the false start, first play of the game, the false start, 4th and 6 in the fourth quarter, and the motion penalty that we had going in on the 3rd and 1. Those ones are very disappointing. The other ones, those are plays that happen. Kevin Alvarado was trying to work a pass rush move and he accidentally grabbed a face mask. I did agree with some of the calls, but the late hit on Brandon Jackson, I mean, their quarterback is tiptoeing the sideline, and when he hits him, his 1 foot's in bounds. Now, was he looking to duck out? I don't know. Later in the game, he does the same thing, and he doesn't duck out of bounds, and Adrian Spencer backs off, and he gives him a concussion. So, was that a bad play by Brandon Jackson? No. The guy was staying in bounds, and, I mean, he was trying to make a tackle. So I go back and I look at every penalty. The undisciplined penalties bother me. The ones that are unforced errors, the ones that happen because an aggressive play was being made. Ben Boychuk's chop block. It looks like a defensive lineman's coming free. He makes a great effort play to try to cut him, and unfortunately at the same time, Shane Steffi steps back into him, and it's a good call, but it wasn't an undisciplined penalty. It was just a guy playing aggressively trying to make a play, and I want to be real careful of discouraging those things because in a lot of cases they're playing with the effort we want. They just got put in a bad place. So, again, there are some things, no question, we need to correct, but probably half of those calls were just things that in the course of playing hard football happen. Some of them were lack of focus ones, and that's what we got to get better at.
Let's talk about Marshall's effort against Virginia Tech and how that you saw on the film.
Well, Virginia Tech is a good football team. Playing at Lane Stadium is one of the toughest challenges in the country. Virginia Tech made some plays. Marshall missed some tackles. The game was actually back and forth a little bit early, and then Virginia Tech just made some big plays. It was a matter of a guy not having his hat in the right gap and a missed tackle, and things just kind of in the second half spun out of control. So there were some things early that they played well, but again, Virginia Tech is a top 8, top 10 program. Again, as a guy that coached in 1AA for a number of years, Southern Illinois is one of the best programs in the country at the 1AA level, and they looked very impressive against them.
Anything else?
You spoke about PJ, again, being a good player, Keith Morgan coming in and stepping in his place, but you talked about losing a guy who's led the team in tackles last year and going into this season. Are you saying that you're not going to miss anything?
No, I didn't say that.
Okay.
Never helps you when you lose a good player. It didn't help us when we lost Mike Green in the spring. It doesn't help us. This will not be an excuse why we're not successful. I have great confidence in Keith Morgan. I think he'll be a really good player. It's hard to replace a guy that has that much experience that PJ has. I mean, he's been a 4-year starter. So I would never say we're not going to miss him. We are going to miss him. You don't just lose good players like that. But things happen in football. Sometimes you lose guys because of an injury. And we lost Tyrone Prime because of an injury, and Calvin Wiley, and Ray Hudson stepping up, and Chris Wright is stepping up. I'd still love to have Tyrone. I mean, that would only make us better. And the same with PJ. I wish he wouldn't have done what he did. But he did it, and the next guy's going to step up, and I have confidence in Keith. So